News where you live. This is KOLO News Channel 8 at 11.
Next on News Channel 8, what issues are most important to local voters? Find out what your neighbors are saying the night before the election.
Plus, the death toll now stands at 11 from the Mizpah hotel fire. So when can the survivors head back inside?
And a dramatic plane crash with one landing right on top of the other. Good evening, I'm Pat Hambright.
And I'm Mai Doe. We begin tonight with Vote 2006. In just over 8 hours, thousands of your neighbors will start heading to the polls to cast their ballot. But what issues will be driving their vote? News Channel 8's James Steiner is live in studio tonight with a closer look. James?
Well, Mai, we wanted to see what your mood was tonight on the eve of Election Day. And candidates, you won't want to hear this, but many of you are still undecided.
Whether it's the governor's race,
I voted for Dina Titus,
or the issues,
I voted no on 4 and no on 5 and yes on 7.
there's definitely a lot of politicking going on outside the Barnes & Noble on South Virginia Street.
I'm horrified by what's happened to our country over the past 6 years.
Many of you think change starts at the federal level, especially when it comes to taxes and spending.
In regards to the different budgets that Congress is doing, where they appropriate their money at.
I'm not going to be too thrilled if I end up owing money on tax day every year.
Whereas other voters say change starts by just eliminating the negative campaigning altogether.
Because you see all these ads on TV and just everyone's awful apparently and just trying to decide who's better. So.
However, some of you say the negative ads haven't necessarily driven you away from the polls.
And I think that I'm going to vote for the candidates that don't, or in this case, the candidate that doesn't campaign in a negative manner.
Because the mudslinging has definitely changed this woman's vote.
I didn't vote for Gibbons is because the cocktail waitress thing mostly.
And of course, that woman was referring to allegations that Congressman Jim Gibbons assaulted and propositioned a Las Vegas cocktail waitress. But at least in that race, analysts say this kind of campaigning works. Gibbons, a clear favorite a month ago, now polls put him only percentage points ahead of Dina Titus. James Steiner, News Channel 8.
On election eve, candidates, their campaign staff, and volunteers were still pushing their message, trying to sway voters.
The most important thing we can do is to make sure that everybody that's going to support us comes out to the polls and casts their ballot.
Volunteer Chris Brown spent part of his day walking a South Reno neighborhood with a list of Republican voters in hand. While some, like Chris, were walking door to door, other volunteers were working the phones at their party headquarters with much the same effort.
Now, even though Congressional District 2 covers all of northern Nevada, the state's southern voters may play a big role in choosing our next representative. That's because District 2 dips all the way down into Clark County, covering Nellis Air Force Base and the fast-growing suburbs north of Las Vegas. But many voters in this area don't even know who the candidates are, and yet they could influence the election.
Yes, I should at least know who I'm voting for tomorrow. I mean, if there's a no, neither of these, I'm going to put neither of these. I don't know anything about either of them.
Who is running for Congress in your district?
Well, I really don't know.
Why do you think most people have answered, I don't know who the person that represents me is here? Do you have any ideas?
Maybe it's not on TV as much.
Ding, ding, ding. Neither of the campaigns of Republican Dean Heller nor Democrat Jill Derby have been taking out TV ads here because it just costs too much in Las Vegas. Instead, the candidates are relying on phone calls and visits from party volunteers.
County election offices are hoping tomorrow goes off without a hitch. In Washoe County today, the staff was counting recently mailed-in absentee ballots, and they were also busy answering all sorts of questions from the public, both in person and over the phone. But even with all the activity, one worker we talked with says things have actually been pretty calm.
It hasn't really been that crazy because we're just doing the absentee ballots. So we've got about a few thousand this morning, which is not bad. And we're about halfway through, actually, receiving them back.
Well, make sure to stay with News Channel 8 for complete election night coverage all evening tomorrow. Now, along with our regular newscasts at 5 and 6:30, we're planning to bring you live coverage of the results shortly after the polls close and then continuing coverage throughout the evening.